Hi, my name is Shelby Nielsen. I'm the college advisor at Kempner High School. And here with me today is Miss Ashley Glover.
Hi, I'm Ashley Glover. I'm the College and Career Readiness Advisor over here at Ridgepoint High School. And we are going to work with our friend Gail. She's going to help us talk about college essays. So, Gail, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Gail Roberson, and I'm the Director of Admissions for Houston for Trinity University, which is in San Antonio, Texas. It has been my joy to work with Fort Bend ISD for the last 8 years with Trinity, and it's my 20th year in college admissions. And that is the beautiful thing about these virtual calls is that you can't see the gray hairs. And so we're enjoying some of these virtual sessions.
Well, we are so happy to have you today. And so we have a couple of questions, and we would really like your feedback, to help and assist our students with their college essay writing. So to kind of get us started, our first question, we just want to know, what are you looking for in a good college essay?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, the essay is my favorite part of the application, or one of my favorite parts of the application, because it's that opportunity for us to see a student's voice and to really hear about their experience and hear their story. I think in some ways as well, though, too, for students, it's the bane of the application. So it tends to be just a little bit tough in order to have that completion. I think that when we're looking for essays and what we are wanting to evaluate in an application is really twofold. One, we want to make sure that we are learning a little bit more about the student. So we want to know about that personality. We want to know a little bit more about what makes the student tick. I think on the other hand, the other point of the essay and reason that we require it as part of the application process is because we want to have a writing sample that's involved as well. And so it really is, again, both to see character and personality, but then also to see and make sure that students are prepared for the writing that's going to be expected in the classroom.
What are a few general tips that you could give to students in their essay writing?
So I think the biggie is going to be to write about something that you want to say and not what you think I want to hear. And so it needs to be meaningful to the student, and it needs to be something that the student really is wanting to communicate. And that's such a important distinction, because I think oftentimes if you kind of trudge through writing this essay, we may also trudge through reading it because it doesn't have that joy or that excitement within the essay. And I think if it's something that a student is really wanting to share with someone else, oftentimes that does correspond with the overall tone of the essay too. And so it's a little more fun, I guess, or interesting to be able to read. So I think that's going to be the first one, is really to make sure that you're writing something that you want to say. I think some of the other tips, and these are all really basic tips that I'm sure you guys also share with your students every time. Edit it, read it out loud so that you can hear when it's a little bit awkward, or maybe when you've misused a word or misplaced some punctuation. Certainly pass it along to somebody else as well and have someone else edit it. And so I think those are really important features. What are some of the advice that you typically give to your students?
For me, one of the things that I typically tell students is to watch out for the overuse of the word I. There are other ways to write a first-person sentence without saying I over and over and over again. I tell the kids all the time, when I'm reading an essay and I keep reading the word I, since I am a parent of young kids, I hear the birds from Finding Nemo in my head going, I can see them sitting on top of the ships with the sun behind them, just going, I have students who have 600, 750 word essays, and they've used the word I 58 times. So yes, it is typically a first person essay. You are writing about yourself, but let's use stronger sentence structure.
Switch it up a little bit, right?
And it's not just I did this and I did that, so let's use that those strong writing skills. So that's one of the things that I definitely tell kids to look at.
That's a great example.
Yeah, I agree. Great example. And I kind of want to just piggyback off of something you said when you mentioned that they want to write about something that the student wants to write about and not try to write for the expectation of what you're looking for. I think that is just so strong to hit home, because I get that question so much. I get, what are the admissions advisors really looking for in my essay? And the answer is that you are you know, and that you are truly coming across as you and passionate about, you know, whatever you're writing about. So I think that's like the best advice. And I'm so glad you mentioned that first, because that's truly one of the things I want to hit home to my students is, don't write for what you expect them to want to hear about you. Write about, you know, something that you're truly passionate about yourself. So thank you for saying that, because that's something that's really big, you know, that I receive as far as questions go.
Do students need to, because when you were talking, you were like joy and happiness. Does the essay always have to be happy, or, you know?
No, and maybe probably better word choice on my part would have been satisfaction and fulfillment, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be effusive and bubbly and, you know, full of joyousness. I think in some ways we want to see that personality in the essay. And so if a student is bubbly and joyful, then that is what we want to see in the essay. If a student is a little more serious and a little more formal, then I'm hoping that that is the tone that comes across. If you're a little sarcastic, it's okay to be a little sarcastic in the essay as well. And so I think it really needs to be a reflection of the student's personality. You know, so I think that that's a great point, Shelby, that it doesn't necessarily have to be a particular tone. But to go back with what Ashley just mentioned, it just needs to be authentic to that particular student. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you are shopping it around to different folks for editing purposes, sometimes it's helpful to hand your essay over to someone who knows you really well and say, does this sound like me, right? And really make sure that, you know, this is my voice that I am communicating in the essay. And then sometimes it's nice to give it to someone who's kind of at arm's length and say, what did you learn about me, if it's a person that doesn't know you very well. So I think sometimes you can really gather a little more information from those editing opportunities too.
So I kind of have a question that piggybacks off of that. So we said it doesn't always have to be, you know, the happy or the joyful. So in some, you know, college essays, if they choose to write about something that was very difficult in their lives, what are some tips that you can give them to kind of to make it not seem negative in a way, and more of, you know, uplifting, positive, and about them, but about themselves at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good question too. So I think that the prompts of the essays many times invite students to talk about challenges that they have experienced. And so a challenge kind of inherently is something difficult, right? And so sometimes there are sometimes those really difficult or frustrating or emotional challenges that we have really been through. I think it's important to make sure that we are reflecting and not just telling about perhaps the challenge, or not just promoting the challenge, but really promoting that reflection that we've had on the experience and the growth. And I think whenever we see the growth, that's going to be the positivity. That's going to be kind of that silver lining. You know, so I think one of the things that we've been talking a lot about in our office is that with the coalition application and with a common application, they are asking about COVID-19 right, and students' response to that. I would expect that this year we're going to have a lot of students write about it, because it has been a huge event for us in the last 6 months. But rather than just focusing on maybe what we weren't able to do in this last 6 months, let's be a little more positive and reflect on how it may have changed us. And again, back to that growth, just to give a solid example. I got to know my little brother a little bit better because we spent so much time together. Or, you know, I perfected my grandmother's meatball recipe because I had time on my hands. Or I made a plethora of TikTok videos and have become an expert, right? Like whatever it might be. But I think, again, showing those elements of growth and sometimes coming out the other side from that challenge is a really important aspect to include in the essay.
Yeah.
So with that being said, you know, what are some of yours, what would be some of your we said some of your do's is reflect and show growth. What would be some of your don't do's in essay writing?
Don't send an essay that has the incorrect name of a university in it. So
Yeah.
I love that you are, absolutely excited about becoming a SMU Mustang, but you were applying to Trinity, right? Or I am, so excited for you to head off to Boston, but we're in San Antonio. So, definitely if you are personalizing the essay, make sure that you are personalizing it appropriately to each of the schools. So I think that's probably a don't that's, we would all agree with. I think in some ways the other don'ts really are more be carefuls rather than the hard and fast rule of don't. I would say be careful about writing an essay that is overly emotional for you, that you are able to talk about it in a reflective sense rather than still being in that moment. I think that if you are writing also about something that is very political or perhaps very religious or very controversial in some particular way, be careful about stating those as I opinions because your reader may have a very different opinion. And you do have to remember that the admission counselor on the other side of the essay is a real person with real opinions sometimes. And so we want to make sure that those are indeed I statements and not you should also feel this way, believe this way, think this way. So I think that those are some of my be careful moments. But I think that as far as don'ts, again, don't use the wrong name of a school. Don't write this in 15 minutes and send it off. Do take a little bit more time. And I would also say don't get hung up on the topic. I think a lot of times students are really concerned about what do I write about, and sometimes seemingly unconventional topics work really well. It's more of how you are writing that than what you are writing as well. So I don't know if that's a true don't. I feel like I cheated that last one, Shelby, but
No, I think that's great. It made me think of a story from another advisor, another college admissions counselor that I knew many years ago, and I asked her one time what if she had a favorite essay that she could remember. And it had been 10 years since she had read that essay, and it was about the student. It was a young lady, had wrote about how she was addicted to jelly beans, and it wasn't. It was kind of like what you said. It wasn't super serious or it wasn't, super sad, but it was super reflective and it was very creative and it was very her with her personality coming out in the writing. But she didn't get hung up on the topic, and it wasn't scared of, kind of thinking outside the box. And she said that, she could just envision the students kind of going with what Ashley was saying earlier with imagery and things like that. She could envision the young lady laying on her bed, holding on to the sides going, don't eat the jelly beans, don't eat the jelly beans, and it just really stood out to her because the student didn't get hung up on the topic, and the student reflected and showed and was able to get the point across in a way that showed her personality and was, what is the word? It was honest of who she was and things like that. So it was, it's, to me, it's kind of hysterical and brilliant. And the student wasn't the best student, but it was just a brilliant way to bring it across. So
absolutely. I think one of my most memorable essays that I've had was probably also about 10 years ago. A student wrote about her fear of bugs, which to me doesn't feel like, I'm going to write my college essay about bugs, right? It doesn't necessarily seem like the recipe for success here, but she did it in a way that, again, reflected on herself, talked about getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and that definitely being a little bit more of an element as she was approaching her college years as well. So yes, I mean, some of those mundane topics can be super effective essays. It's really how you do it rather than what.
And I want to ask a question about that too, because these are great stories. It's like storytelling about yourself, but not giving really a biography or whatever. But so what are your thoughts on just storytelling, and in what ways could that be effective, without saying this is my story, but maybe saying it in a view of another, but it's still being your story? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
what can you talk about how maybe different viewpoints could be effective?
I do think that storytelling can be very effective in an essay, but at some point we need to stop telling the story and start telling about ourselves, right?
Okay.
And so what I mean by that is I think sometimes a very effective introductory paragraph can be setting the stage, using imagery and really showing, not just telling. So thinking about those senses. What did the situation smell like, sound like, feel like, and really kind of drawing your reader in. So I am saying at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm reading your application, I want to know more, right?
Yeah.
But I think also at some point we need to shift from the story and start that reflection. And so I think, to only stay in story mode is a wonderful, beautiful, creative writing example, but it may not necessarily be a personal essay where, again, it needs to be about the student. I think sometimes too, one of the traps, and this is a little tangential, Ashley, to the question, I think one of the traps sometimes students can fall into is maybe they are talking about a particular topic, but have never inserted themselves into the essay either. And so again, we are wanting to learn about you. And so, with the storytelling or with maybe more expository writing even, make sure that the essay is indeed reflective about the writer and not just the image, I guess, itself.
Yeah.
How long would you say an essay needs to be? Is there a length that, for Apply Texas or Common App or Coalition, is there a specific or a recommendation on length that you would make? Because that is a question that I know I get all. How long does it need to be, Miss Nilsson?
Right.
I do too.
I'm going to sound like such an English teacher. As long as it needs to be, right? To a certain extent. I would say a paragraph is not going to be long enough. If you have given me a paragraph, I'm writing down in my notes 1 paragraph essay, which isn't a compliment. So definitely, a longer than that. I will say though, when we get into probably the 3rd, 4th page, we probably have a pretty good sense of your writing. So I would say rule of thumb here, probably keep it to about a page, possibly 2 pages. And I'm talking about 2 pages, double spaced regular writing on a Google Doc or a Word doc, not necessarily within the application itself. But definitely think about those word limits and try to stick to them. Some of the applications will cut you off once you have hit the word limit. Others will give you a little bit of grace period, but definitely try to stick to that word limit that is assigned.
So a page. I'm not an English teacher, or I was not an English teacher by trade. I was a business teacher by trade. So word limit for a page is what would you?
Oh gosh, Shelby, you're
750.
I would say 750 probably is total, not for about a page and a half. So that's probably what we would be looking at.
Okay. So about 750 words max is where you kind of want to, so not the 900 word essay.
Well, and I've had students that have submitted samples of books that they're writing. I had a young woman several years ago submit 52 pages of a medieval mystery that she was working on, which was fantastic. But again, probably didn't need all 52 pages. I've also had students submit haikus, not long enough, right? So give me something in the middle there.
Excellent.
Gotcha. So I think we kind of touched on this a little. I just want to kind of go back to this, review this topic. But so as they're sharing these, personal stories about themselves, is it possible to overshare? And if so, kind of what are the limits on that?
Yeah, I think in some ways this is kind of that personal gauge. If this is not necessarily something that you would be willing to talk about in an interview with your admission counselor, or many times your application record does become part of your permanent record at your college or university. So if this is not necessarily something that you're wanting, say, an academic advisor to see a little bit later on, then it may not be an appropriate communication for that admission essay. And so I do want to really be respectful of students, I think, wanting to share, again, challenges, experiences within their lives, but I don't ever want them to feel overly vulnerable. And so there is kind of that nice balance that we probably need to keep within the essay as well, so that they don't feel overexposed if that essay is seen by an academic advisor or someone besides just the admission staff member.
Okay.
Excellent. Do you have any recommendations on resources? Because this question that I know that we get a lot is, Miss, where can I find sample essays? I really want to see what somebody else has written. Where, so are there any resources that you would recommend to students on where to find some samples, or just some best tips and best practices and things like that? And if you do, then we can always give it to the district and have it posted on the district website along with this video.
Absolutely. I think I am also that kind of learner that I sort of need the visual. I want the example of what works, to be able to move forward. There are 2 colleges that I can think of that have done a fantastic job of offering sample essays of essays that worked for particular classes. So Johns Hopkins is one of those, and the second college is Hamilton. And so I can provide the links for both of those pages for some of the sample essays of folks that have applied to those particular colleges. Another resource, if you're needing a little bit more, I would say, assistance or guidance on the mechanics of writing, as well as just kind of how to construct an essay, the College Essay Guy. That is his name. He has his own YouTube channel, his own webpage as well, but his resources are indeed free for students. I think he does a phenomenal job of breaking it down. So there are some really nice step-by-step YouTube videos of how to kind of have the brainstorm session. Once you have the brainstorm session, how do I organize this in a way that makes a little bit more sense? And really answering some of these same questions that we're talking about today. I think his actual given name is Ethan Sawyer. It's not the College Essay Guy, but either one of those would be a quick Google, and you can find him as well.
That's excellent.
Yes, that's excellent. Thank you for giving those resources to our students.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's all the questions I have. You've covered, everything I can think of. Shelby, did you have anything else for Gail?
No, just to recap on a few things that she's mentioned is proofread, proofread, provide it to family, friends, teachers, have them review it, and have them reflect on it as well.
Right.
One more thing that I would maybe recommend is make sure you type it in Word first or in a Google Doc first. That way you, because a lot of times in Apply Texas especially, it's a text field. It's not a word processing field. It's just a straight text field. So you may not realize it if you hit the space bar before the comma. So make sure that you type it in like a Word document or something like that first. Try not to be overly negative. You can write about whatever you want to write about. It is what you are passionate about, what makes you feel like you. Make sure your voice is being shared in your essay. Be reflective and show growth. Those were 2 of the things that Gail really talked about a lot, is make sure you are being reflective on whatever it is you're writing about, and that you are showing growth in your essay.
Shelby, can I add one more?
Yes.
Enjoy it.
Yes.
Right. This is your story. This is your voice. This is when you get to be more than your transcript or potential test scores or something along those lines. We want to see our applicants as people. And so I think that this is a really enjoyable way for us to get a little bit of a window into our students' experiences as well. So I do want to thank students for sharing those stories with us.
I have one more question before, and then I think I'll be done. What would you say if a student submitted an essay and the essay really read more like a resume?
Mhm.
Oh, good question, Shelby. Very good question.
Yeah, I do think that when students are answering some of the prompts that are a little bit more career related, or if they are being asked to talk a little bit more about academic or extracurricular experiences, I think many times we can kind of see that we fall into that trap of putting our resume in paragraph form. I would actually encourage students to think about one or two activities from that laundry list of things that we've been involved in and really expand on those, because we will see your resume or your list of activities. We don't need to read about it again in paragraph form. So, choose one, choose two, or choose a couple, but showing growth within those few, or ways that you were able to develop. And so I do think back to that reflection. This is critical thinking at its best, that we want to make sure that that is, involved in the essay as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. That just kind of popped in for a second. I think that we have given our kiddos a lot to think about, a lot of information,
Absolutely.
a lot of resources and things like that. So I hope that the kids take a lot from this interview, hopefully more than what they would have had we just sat there with a PowerPoint presentation. So hopefully they get something out of this. I think it makes it much more personal and gives them that personal feel on what they're doing and things like that. So thank you so much, Gail, for being here with us today. We cannot thank you enough. Any last things to add, Ashley?
No, like you said, I mean, thank you so much. I think this is valuable for our students, and we greatly appreciate all of the advice and everything that you've given us today to work with. And, I think this will be a great resource for our students. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for including me. This was fun.
All right.
I'm going to end now. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Bye, Gail. Thank
Bye.
you.